Hello, I'm Heather, and today we're going to learn how to create a flat tap effect with visual scripting using variables. In this tutorial, you'll be learning how to use variables in your visual scripting workflow in Effect Maker. Variables store information for your effect to remember and use later. We'll be creating an effect where you can tap on the screen and loop through different spotlight colors. With variables, many more options open up, as they allow you to store values that you can reference at a later time in your effect. For example, if we're making an effect where the user gets to choose between different answers and receives a result, then we could use a variable to store each of the user's answers and then reference them at a later point to calculate that result. To start creating, let's first navigate to our visual scripting panel. We can either add a node through the visual scripting hand icon located on the left side of the screen to open the panel, or by easily clicking on the Change Layout button located at the top right of Effect Maker. I'm going to click on the Change Layout button. On the top bar of the visual scripting panel, located on the left, there is a button that has a symbol that looks similar to an X. We can click on it to open a Variables panel. This panel is where you can manage all the variables that are currently in your project. You can also add and delete variables here. Visual script variables can store many different types of data, including numbers, vectors, text, booleans, colors, and image assets. Let's create a counter where a number is displayed on the screen, and when the user taps on a button, it increases by 1. To begin, we'll need to use a variable. As you can see in our Variables panel, there are currently no variables in our project yet. Let's click on the plus button at the top right of the Variables panel to add a variable. An edit panel will appear. Here you can edit the name of your added variable, the data type, value type, and the value that it is holding. The type property of a variable controls the type of data that this variable can hold. Data types that are currently supported include number, text, boolean, 2D vector, 3D vector, color, and asset. The value type property of a variable controls whether the variable is a single value or a list of values. A single value is only one value, whereas a list of values is an ordered collection of items, such as numbers, words, or images. For right now, we'll focus on using a single value variable. I'm also going to keep the type of this variable set to number and rename our variable to index count. When finished, we can click on the back button that is right next to the edit text at the top of the panel. Our index count variable is now visible in our variables panel. If we want to get or set the value that it holds, we will need to get the corresponding nodes. There are 2 ways to do this. One way is to right-click on the variable that you want to get the nodes for in the variables panel, and then select the get variable or set variable options. The second way is to right-click in our Visual Script panel as if we're adding any other Visual Script node, go to the Objects and Properties category, and click on Get Variable or Set Variable from there. Let's add a Get Variable node and a Set Variable node to our graph. Let's also go to the Triggers category and add an Object Tap node to our graph. Once all 3 nodes are added, connect the next execution output of our Object Tap node into the Start input of our Set Variable node. We'll need to give our Object Tap an object to detect taps on, so I'll right-click in the Objects panel and just add an image. We can then select the image that we just added for the object property of our Object Tap. Now, when we tap on the image, it will set our variable, but why don't we see the change? There are 2 reasons. Our variable is currently only represented in our script and not being displayed on the screen, and then the value that we're giving it is currently still 0, the same as our variable's default value. Let's fix the first issue and display our variable's value on the screen. To do this, we can add a text object. Next, we want to control the text content of this object in our script. Navigate back to the Visual Script panel, go to the Objects and Properties category, and add a Set Property node. We want to assign the object that it sets as our text object that we just added to the scene, and select the property we're setting as the text property. Because our index count variable has a type of number, and the text property has a type of text, we can't directly connect the output port of our get variable node to the input port of our set text node's text input port. We'll need to convert the number value to a text in order to display it on the screen. We can go to the time and utility category and add a number to text node to convert our number to text. Connect the output of our get variable node into the number input of the number to text node. Next, connect the text output of the number to text node to the text input of our set text node. Our variable successfully converts. To actually set the value to our text, we need to trigger it. Connect the next execution output of our set variable node to the start input of our set text node. When we tap on the image on our screen, we can see that the text displayed changes to value 0. Great work! However, since we want to increase the number and don't want it to permanently stay at 0, we need to add to it every time that the user clicks on the button. We can do this by adding an add node from the math category. This node lets us add two numbers together and then outputs the sum. Ideally, we want to add 1 to whatever our index counts variable's value currently is. So let's connect the value output of our get variable node into the input 1 port of our add node. We can manually change input 2's value to be 1. Then let's connect the value output of our add node into the value input of our set variable node. This means that now, every time we tap on the image, our variable will increase by 1 and display on the screen. Test it out! It works! Although we have a number counter, we still need to adjust our code to loop through different colors for a spotlight image. To do this, we will add functionality where we alternate through a list of different colors on the screen whenever the user taps on an image button. A variable that can hold a list of different color values would be perfect for this task. Let's open up our variables panel and add another variable. We can set the name of this variable to color options and set the variable's type to color. Since we want this variable to store a list of multiple different color values instead of only storing one color, we will need to switch the value type from single value to list of values. As you can see, once we select this option, the value of our variable turns to list of values and an add button appears. We can click on this add button to add more color values to our list. Let's click on the add button and add a total of 5 color values to our color options list. If you look closely, the position of each item in a list of values variable is indicated by its number. The first item is 0, it has an index of 0. The second item is 1, it has an index of 1, and so on. We can select the color squares on each of these values and change each color value to one of our preferred colors. We can also type in our preferred color code. Once you're satisfied with the color values and color options variable, you can click the back button to exit editing the variable. Now we need to get all of the color values that are stored in the color options variable. We can right-click on the color options variable and add a get variable node to our script graph. Getting the value of a list value variable is slightly different than a single value variable. When using a get variable node for a variable of value type list of values, it retrieves an entire list of values instead of only a single value. Therefore, we have to add another node that specifically retrieves which value we want from the list. We can navigate to Time and Utility category and add a Get from List node for this. Connect the output value of the Get variable node to the list input port of the getFromList node. The index property of the getFromList node determines exactly which value we want to get, so the value's position in the list. I'm going to keep the index at 0 for right now. Our getFromList node is correctly retrieving a value from our color options list. Now we need to use the value that we're retrieving to change the color tint of our spotlight. Let's quickly add in our spotlight asset texture via the Asset tab and Upload button. Once we have our spotlight asset imported, we can go back to our Objects tab, add an image object, and then select our spotlight asset as the asset to apply to our image. We should move our spotlight above our image button in the Objects panel to be layered behind and ensure that the image button will be able to detect tabs. We can also adjust our spotlight's position and sizing. Let's make our spotlight responsive to color changes and button tabs. First, we'll add a Set Property node to our graph, and select the object that it is setting as our spotlight image. Next, select the property that is being set on the image as the color tint property. This will transform it into a setColorTint node that accepts color value types to set the color tint of an image. Connect the output value port of our getFromList node to the color tint input port of our setColorTint node. Then, let's reference our previous code with the button tabs. Let's move our setColorTint node in between our Object Tap and setVariable nodes by connecting our Object Tap's next execution output port into the Start input port of our setColorTint node, and our setColorTint node's next execution output port into our setVariable node's Start input port. Now, when we tap on our image button in the preview panel, the spotlight changes to the color value of our first value in our color options list. The color of our image doesn't change beyond the first click, so let's fix that. We can connect the output number value of our old getVariable node that is retrieving our index count variable, and connect it to the input port of our getFromList node's index property. Now, whenever we tap on the image, our spotlight's color tint changes between the different colors. There is only one more issue left. When we reach the last color in our list, the color tint stops changing. Ideally, we want to loop back to the first color at index 0 when our index count variable reaches the same number value as the color option list variable's length. To do this, let's add a few new nodes. First, we'll want to add a greater than or equal to node from the logic category to compare our index count's current value with a maximum value. Then, we'll add an if node from the control flow category. Connect the greater than or equal to node to the if node's condition input, and connect the getVariable node for our index count variable to input 1 of our greater than or equal to node. We could also adjust input 2 to be a value such as 3. We should now connect the output execution of our setText node into our if node. Let's duplicate our index count old setVariable node, change its value to set as 0, and connect the if node's true execution output into the setVariable node's start input execution. Now, whenever our index count variable reaches the same value, that is, whichever value is input 2 in the greater than or equal to node, it will start and reloop the colors. We could either manually edit input 2 and adjust it to be the number of colors that we have in the list every time we update our colors list, or we could add functionality where it automatically updates the length of what our list can look through. I want to go with the automatic option, so I will go to Time and Utility and add a getListLength node to retrieve how many values our list variable is storing. Connect the color options getVariable node's value output into the get list length node's list input. Next, connect the get list length number output port into the second port of our greater than or equal to node. We can also turn off the visibility of our text, so all that is seen is our spotlight. Now, when we tap on our button, our spotlight correctly changes colors and loops back around. Great work! We've finished the functionality of our effect. The more complicated your script gets, the more of a chance that you may run into bugs where some of your nodes aren't executing as expected, or the values that are being output are not what is expected. For debugging number values in Effect Maker, one of the best solutions is to display the number values to the screen using the text object in the same method explained earlier. To find and fix any bug in general, a helpful tip is to identify and narrow down what could possibly be causing the issue. For example, if you have a button that is working to change numbers in your text, but you're also supposed to be changing the color of a light, and that color isn't changing, then most likely the bug is going to be somewhere in your logic for setting the color of the light, or how the set color of light is triggered, and not in your logic that triggers your button. We should test our effect on our mobile device. First, make sure that you're signed into the same YouTube account on your phone as you're signed into with Effect Maker. Then you can click on the Preview on Device button that is located at the very top of the screen. It will open a pop-up that shows a QR code. Open up your camera app on your mobile device and use it to scan this QR code. It should load your effect inside the YouTube camera on your phone. This will allow you to test out your effect and ensure that it meets full expectations before publishing. Once we're happy with our effect, we can click the Submit button. A submission panel will appear where we can add an icon for our effect. We should give our effect a name and also add a description for our effect. If your effect has any functionality that allows the user to interact with it, you'll be given the option to choose an instruction for it. Instructions appear on the effect when users use it to give them guidance on what is needed. It's always best to add instructions so users can clearly understand how to use your effect. Finally, we can click Submit to finalize and send our effect out for review. Want to explore and create more amazing interactive effects? You can check out some of Effect Maker's already made effect templates to learn and discover how you can create more kinds of effects. For more info on how to use Effect Maker, check out the links in the description below. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for even more news and updates.